Let me start with something uncomfortable. Most people think Venezuela collapsed because of one dramatic event, one bad leader, one election, one big mistake. But that's not what happened. Venezuela didn't collapse overnight. It didn't explode. It didn't announce itself. It slowly suffocated. And that's what makes it terrifying. Because slow collapse doesn't feel like an emergency. It feels like everyday life getting slightly worse, then slightly worse again, then normal. Prices creep up, choices disappear, rules change, trust fades, and nobody can point to one moment where it began. Until one day, people look around and realize the country they grew up in is gone. And here's why this matters to you. The mechanism that broke Venezuela isn't Venezuelan. It's not some rare, exotic disaster. It's a pattern. And if you think it could never happen where you live, that's exactly how every slow collapse starts.
If you talk to people who lived through Venezuela's decline, they all say the same thing. Not, "We saw it coming," not, "We knew this would happen." They say, at first, nothing made sense. Life just started feeling off. You'd hear things like, "Why does this feel harder than it used to? Why does my money not last the same? Why do the rules keep changing?" But there was never a clear answer. Every explanation sounded vague, temporary, technical. It's global, it's complicated, it's just a rough period. And when nothing makes sense, people do something very human. They assume they are the problem. Maybe I'm bad with money. Maybe I didn't adapt fast enough. Maybe I made the wrong choices. So people adjust. They lower expectations. They normalize pressure. And because the change is slow, there's no single moment where people say, "This is it. This is the collapse." That confusion isn't a coincidence. When things are confusing, people don't resist. They adapt. They cope. They survive. And that's how slow collapse works. Not through panic, not through chaos, but through quiet normalization. And here's the part that almost nobody explains properly. Because this pressure didn't come from nowhere. It didn't just happen, and it definitely didn't arrive overnight. What you're feeling is the result of a system that quietly shifted, while most people were busy trying to keep up. There wasn't one big announcement, no dramatic collapse, no single moment where everything broke. Instead, the rules changed slowly, quietly, piece by piece. And the reason it's so hard to describe is simple. We're taught to look at individual problems, not the structure connecting them. Taxes go up, wages lag behind, debt grows, prices creep higher, opportunities narrow. Each thing looks separate, manageable, temporary, but they're not separate. They're connected. It's like feeling the room get colder without ever being shown the thermostat. You're told, this is normal. This is necessary. This is just how things work now. But no one explains why this version of normal keeps putting pressure in the same places, on the same people, again and again. And here's what makes it worse. When systems are hard to understand, people don't resist them. They adapt to them. They internalize them. They assume the problem is personal, so they work harder. They cut back. They take on more risk. They blame themselves. And the system doesn't need to defend itself at all. That confusion, that feeling that something is off but hard to name, that's not ignorance. That's instinct. And it's pointing at something very specific, something structural, something that didn't disappear with old empires, but quietly evolved. We're not going to jump ahead yet, because before you can understand how it works, you need to see that it works this way, consistently. So before we talk about history, or debt, or power, or empires, we need to slow this down. Because once you see the pattern, the confusion disappears. And that's where we're going next.
Let's pause for a second. Because here's the thing. This isn't as complicated as it feels. The reason it feels overwhelming is because it's usually explained backwards, with jargon, charts, and disconnected details. So let's flip that. Instead of starting with policies or numbers, we're going to start with the structure. Because what's happening follows a pattern, a very old one. And once you see that pattern, everything else starts to make sense. We're going to break this down in a simple way. First, how stability is created. Then, how that stability slowly shifts. Then, who benefits when it does, and who quietly absorbs the cost. And finally, why going back is much harder than people think. No politics, no sides, no lectures. Just the mechanics. Because once you understand how the structure works, you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking much better questions. And that's where the real clarity begins.
Most explanations stop at the same place. They say, people just don't work as hard anymore. Expectations are unrealistic. This generation wants too much. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. When life feels harder, when stability feels further away, the easy conclusion is that effort disappeared. But that explanation falls apart the moment you zoom out, because effort didn't vanish. If anything, most people feel like they're doing more just to stay in the same place. More hours, more skills, more stress, less margin. That tells us something important. The problem isn't motivation, it's not discipline, and it's not that people suddenly forgot how to try. The problem is that effort is no longer what the system primarily rewards. The rules didn't break, they changed, quietly, and most people are still playing by the old ones. This isn't about laziness, it's about misalignment. A system can look functional on the surface while quietly punishing the behaviors that used to create stability. And once that shift happens, working harder doesn't feel empowering anymore. It feels exhausting. That's not a personal failure. That's a structural signal. Here's the part most people don't realize. When systems stop rewarding effort and start rewarding position, it doesn't happen randomly. It's not a modern accident, it's not a glitch, and it's definitely not unique to today. This shift has happened before, many times. Different countries, different centuries, different technologies, but the same underlying pattern. Every time a system grows large enough, complex enough, and dependent enough on borrowed stability, the same pressures appear. At first, things still look normal. People keep working. Institutions keep functioning. The surface doesn't crack right away. But underneath, the incentives quietly change. And once they do, the outcome becomes surprisingly predictable. Not overnight, not dramatically. Slowly, quietly, almost politely. History doesn't repeat itself loudly. It repeats itself structurally. And when you know what to look for, you start seeing the same shape showing up again and again. You can see this pattern show up again and again once you know where to look. In different places, under different ideologies, with completely different tools. In some cases, it came through currency manipulation. In others, through massive borrowing. Sometimes through state-controlled credit. Sometimes through private finance tied to government power. The details change. The structure doesn't. At first, debt feels useful. It fills gaps. It smooths crises. It buys time. Then it becomes permanent. Not because anyone planned it that way, but because reversing it becomes too painful. Spain learned this when silver stopped solving its problems. France learned it when paper money stopped inspiring confidence. Other countries learned it when credit replaced productivity. Every time, the same thing happened. The system didn't collapse immediately. It tightened, slowly, unevenly, silently.
and the people in the middle felt it first. What makes this important is not the dates or the names, it's the direction. Once an economy crosses a certain threshold, effort alone stops being enough. And from that point on, the pressure doesn't disappear, it just moves. What's important to understand is this. It doesn't matter how the system is built. It can be capitalist, it can be socialist, it can be colonial, it can be modern. It can run on paper money, digital money, oil revenue, or foreign loans. When an economy becomes dependent on debt instead of production, the outcome doesn't change. At first, everything looks manageable. Then flexibility disappears. Then pressure concentrates. And finally, people start feeling trapped. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. What breaks isn't just the economy. It's trust. It's planning. It's the sense that effort leads somewhere. This is why people in very different countries start describing the same feeling with the same words. I did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. That's not coincidence. That's structure. And this is where Venezuela stops being an exception and starts being a warning. Here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Because when systems like this tighten, they don't hurt everyone equally. Some groups actually benefit, not because they plan to collapse, not because they're evil, but because they're positioned differently. When an economy becomes dependent on debt, those closest to money gain flexibility. Banks don't fear instability, they price it. Financial institutions don't struggle with debt, they manage it. Asset holders don't lose purchasing power, they watch prices rise. And governments? They gain room to breathe. Inflation reduces the real weight of old obligations. Debt looks smaller over time. Pressure gets pushed forward into the future. Nothing illegal, nothing secret, just incentives doing what incentives always do. This is the moment where the rules quietly change. The system stops rewarding effort and starts rewarding access. And once that happens, stability becomes something you inherit, not something you earn. And this is the part most people never get to see clearly. Because once a system like this is in place, it doesn't feel oppressive. It feels normal. You're not being forced. You're not being punished. You're just always catching up. You work, you comply, you adapt, and every year stability feels a little further away. Not because you did something wrong, not because you didn't try hard enough, but because the rules quietly shifted underneath you. That's why these systems last so long. They don't collapse with explosions. They erode with paperwork, with obligations, with promises that slowly turn into constraints. And most people don't rebel against that. They internalize it. They blame themselves. They assume they're missing something. They think the pressure is personal. But it isn't. It's structural. And once you see that, you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" And you start asking a much more dangerous question. If effort no longer leads to stability and dependence feels permanent, then who is this system really designed for? And maybe more importantly, how long can something like this keep working before people stop adapting and start questioning the rules themselves?